There are always three speeches for every one you actually gave: the one you practiced, the one you gave, and the one you wish you gave. Dale Carnegie. All right. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. Speaking of so early, I have a minor announcement. I've been telling you the last week or so that my son started school this week, and we are kind of experimenting with our morning routine because his routine now versus when he was in pre-K is entirely different. He has to be at school now about 7:30 or so, and or that's when the car line starts. And prior to that, in VPK, he actually didn't have to be there until 9. So there was quite a drastic difference. And so to accommodate everybody's schedule and getting everybody where they need to be on time, I will be moving the show to 7:30. But again, please keep in mind that the next few days, week or so, we may have some changes back and forth, maybe a little bit delayed, might even be early. I know that tomorrow I'm supposed to have on Rory Diamond. He is from District 13 and here in Jacksonville. He's a city council member, and he's going to come on and talk about some legislation that he has proposed. And I initially told him 7 o'clock, so I'm going to reach out to him and see if 7:30 will work just as well. But if not, we may do 7. So, but anyway, for the next week or so, just bear with me as we work out our schedules and get things kind of adjusted to the new way of doing things now that my little guy is in school. So that's what we got. All right. So today, what are we talking about? Well, we're going to follow up on yesterday's podcast. Yesterday, I spoke about legislation here in Jacksonville. It's kind of, if you look in the news, it's being termed as or it was termed as the anti hate bill. And I'm not going to rehash the whole bill, but basically, what it would do, had it passed, it did not, had it passed, what it would have done is to add penalties for crimes when effectively the purpose of the crime was like a hate, when it was hate. So if you think about, like, let's say a man goes to the store, gets in a fight with another man and stabs him and, whatever. And, or, maybe he thinks about it ahead of time. So it's like premeditated. Maybe he just does it spontaneously. But whatever the reason, it has nothing to do with, the person's sexuality or their gender or their race or anything along that line. Maybe he just didn't like the guy, or he had some beef, like, hey man, you were supposed to pay me some money and you didn't. And so then he goes and he attacks him, right? So that's a crime. And what this bill would do is, if instead it wasn't about, hey, maybe you owe me some money, but maybe the guy says, you know what? I don't like Jews. I'm going to go and I'm going to attack Jewish people. And so then maybe he went and he found some Jews and he attacked them. Well, let's say that he put that information out on social media somewhere, or he wrote a manifesto. Well, then what would happen is that this bill would have added penalties, increased penalties, for the fact that he did it because of the person's race or gender or something like that. In other words, it would have been, in my mind, and what many should rightfully see it as, thought crimes, right? So we already have the crime, and we're dealing with that. That's getting punished one way or another. But then it's like, why did you do it? Did you do it because you hated somebody specifically for some particular reason? Well, in that case, we're going to make the punishment extra harsh for you. And so I opposed that. And I'll read the speech. I was unable to get the video. Sadly, I apologize, but it did just happen last night, and the video is not yet posted. So I was not able to grab the speech. But if you follow me on social media, I'll be posting it, in the next few days whenever I have access to it. But I will read it because it's going to be part of the show today. So with that in mind, let's see how the news reported this, and then we will talk a little bit about it. Of course, the audio is not working again. Let me see. I swear it was just working. Not working. What's going on here? I don't know what. Let's try this. Try this, and then we're gonna. I think I know what's going on, and there we
Pittman,
go.
Reggie
Okay,
Gaffney
sorry.
Jr.
There we go.
In other local news tonight, the Jacksonville City Council has rejected a bill to enhance penalties for those who commit hate crimes. The final vote was 12-7. The 7 council members who voted in favor of the bill were bill sponsor Jimmy Peluso, Michael Boyland, Matt Carlucci, Tyrona Clark Murray, Jacoby Pittman, Reggie Gaffney Jr., and Rockman Johnson. Support for the bill had been mixed. Some council members say the anti-hate laws on the books are enough and a new law is unnecessary. We spoke with Councilman Peluso after the vote tonight.
Of course, no one's saying that this is a hateful city by any means. What we are saying is let's ensure that we have some real teeth and in a unified voice say we do not want any senseless, hateful actions in our city. And I'm a little disappointed we didn't see that tonight.
The bill was introduced earlier this year and inspired by the racially motivated murders of A.J. Laguerre Jr., Angela Carr, and Gerald Gallion at a Dollar General store on Kings Road almost a year ago. The bill was also amended to be named in honor of Johnny May Chappelle, who was shot and killed in a racist attack 60 years ago. This is the only known picture of her. Her son addressed the council before tonight's vote.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Even if you don't pass the bill, I thank you because you considered it. And that's all I need to say. I love everyone. Thank you.
All right. So that's how the news reported it. And, pretty straightforward. But let's take a look at some of those votes because I've got some interesting things to show you here. So let's see what we got. So here are the votes that that you just saw. All right. And so you can see that 7 yeses, 12 abstains. I'm sorry. 7 yeses, 12 noes, 0 abstains. So that's good. Everybody should vote on it. In very rare cases, somebody should be abstaining, in my opinion. But if you don't recognize these names, maybe some pictures will help. So I've went and done the due diligence to give you a little bit more graphical information on this, because that's what we do here on the Liberty Dad Show. We try to make things as awesome as possible. So here we go. And I'm going to explain some of these to you just so you kind of get an idea of, our city council and what's going on. So what you're looking at here, and let me turn off my little logo there so you can see Amaro's face. So these are in order. So we have 14 districts and then we have 5 at-large seats, and they're in order. And what I've gotten here is the border around each picture designates their political party. So you can see that Peluso, Gaffney, Clark, Murray, Pittman, and Johnson are all Democrats and the rest are Republicans. Okay. And then their names with their district number are either in red or green. Green means they voted for it, and red means they voted against it. They voted no. And what's interesting is it's mostly party line. However, you do see a break here with Boylan and Matt Carlucci from At Large 4. They are Republicans, but they did vote in favor of the bill. So this is just a breakdown of who did what, who voted what. So now you know, and take it as you will. Maybe you are happy with how your representative voted. Maybe you're not. Feel free to email them. These are the kind of things that you need to keep up with. Now, when it comes to the bottom 5, they are at large and they represent the whole city. So for instance, if you are, let me pick one. Let's say Johnson. Let's say Rockman Johnson over here in the middle to the far right, District 14. If you're happy with his vote, then email him and say, thank you for voting yes. And he was also a sponsor of the bill, by the way. And then feel free to email the bottom 5, the at large, and say, hey, with the exception of Carlucci, I'm upset that you didn't vote yes. Now, if it's the opposite, if you're disappointed in the yes votes, you wanted your city council to vote against it, then using the same example, email Rockman Johnson and say, all right, well, I'm disappointed that you voted yes or supported it in the first place. Same for Carlucci. And then the other 4 at large, communicate to them and say, hey, I'm glad you voted no. So that's just wanted to put this little graphic up there and put some faces to these names and give you an idea of the breakdown, but it was mostly along party lines. So that's what you have there. And let's see what else. Well, I want to get into, so I went and spoke, and it was funny because I met with somebody yesterday on behalf of the party. Now, when I say the party, I am the chair of the Libertarian Party here at Duval, and I went and met with somebody yesterday and had coffee with them. And then through that conversation, I found out that coincidentally, the bill was going to be voted on last night. And so I was like, oh, wow, I would like to actually go and speak about this bill. And so I took a look at the schedule and, wrote up a speech and figured it out. Now, here's the thing about going down to city council. And this applies, like, if you're not from Jacksonville, this probably still applies to you. So this is going to be some useful information for anyone. What happens is some things, there's people that go down to give public comment at their local city council. Sometimes there's a topic that's extremely hot button. And for those topics, you end up getting a lot of people. And so like our city council designates 90 minutes for public comment. So they got to squeeze everybody in there. And so what happens is you start off, they give you 3 minutes to speak. But if there's a bunch of people, because maybe there's a hot topic or maybe even 2 hot topics, then what they'll do is they'll reduce that time. So then the question is like, well, how do you deal with that? Because if you want to go down and speak your piece, and you should, and not necessarily for everything, but at least for things that are important to you, whatever it is. Maybe there's development that's happening by your neighborhood, and the city council wants to hear from you. Well, go down and talk to them about it. Think about what you want to say. Think about your position on the matter. Write up a speech. Go down there, or speak from the heart. What have you? But go down. And, for the things that are less important, maybe it's happening on the other side of the city and you're not as, hey, let those folks take care of it. That's fine too. I mean, you don't have to go down for everything. But I'm going to give you some tips. I'm going to walk through my speech. And I'm going to give you some tips so that when you go speak, you can be at your best. So before I do that though, let me throw up a comment or two here. So let's see. Yeah. Thank you, Liberty Dad, for going down to City Hall to comment on the hate bill. Absolutely. Trying to do my civic duty, trying to get down there. And it's my civic duty for more than one reason. 1, I'm a citizen. And then 2, I'm also the chair of the party. So I should perhaps go down occasionally and talk about, issues that are, that have become big issues in the city. So I was talking mostly for me, but whenever I speak, because I'm the chair, I'm basically speaking on behalf of the party. Like that's effectively how it's going to be seen, whether I like it or not. So I try to always make sure that, what I have to say reflects well on the party. All right, so let's take a look. Actually, before we get into that, let's look at some comments on Twitter that I saw after the bill failed. Okay, so you get 12 votes for no. Let's take a look at some comments, and I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on the matter. All right, so here's one. So what I did, just to make this super duper easy, this David Barlin, I think is how you say his name. He's a reporter. He reported the information. A bunch of people quote tweeted it, and I was like, oh, that's some interesting comments here. So we'll just kind of give you a feel for what at least people on social media have been saying. Shelton Hall says $1 says it happens again this year now that city council has voted to stand with domestic terrorists. Hopefully they don't escalate to violence because no one's going to stop them. I actually disagree, and he would lose $1. I'm not sure that I'm willing to wager money on whether somebody gets killed and then happily take $1 they don't, and happily give or unhappily give a dollar when they do. That seems it seems a bit crass. I don't think I'm going to do that. But the thing here is, now that city council has voted to stand with domestic terrorists, well, they didn't. This is an absurd comment. It doesn't even make any sense. All they did was say, we're not voting, because like everybody in favor of, let's put it this way, everybody in favor of the bill, they said, hey, nothing's going to change, right? Like, the same crimes that were crimes yesterday will be a crime tomorrow. Okay, cool. So taking that, the same crimes that were a crime yesterday are still a crime today. So there's no standing with domestic terrorists. That doesn't make sense because it's still a crime to do these things. The only thing that's still not a crime is to be thinking hateful about it before you do it. That's what's not a crime. So you're not standing with terrorists and doing this. This is an absurd comment. Let's see what else we got. It's bold. Let's see if I can get this. It's bold to have Nazi symbols shown on our buildings during national events, and a city council that is apparently completely fine with that being our national reputation. Okay. That doesn't make any sense either. The city council didn't vote on whether or not it was okay to have Nazi symbols shown on buildings. And furthermore, Mr. Jags fan, Brian, you might remember that the city council passed legislation that bans shining laser lights and stuff like that on buildings. So actually, it's quite the opposite. Like, your facts are incorrect. They actually voted a bill, which I opposed for different reasons. And you can go back and look at some of my past episodes for that. So it doesn't make any sense. Ms. Hathaway says the fact Jacksonville City's council couldn't unanimously get behind an anti-hate crime bill is beyond me. It actually brings me to tears as we approach the 1-year mark of the racist hate crime at the Dollar General. Thank you to the 7 Yay members. I guess it's beyond you because, maybe you're not thinking about it in any other terms than, hey, if we impose this extra punishment, maybe people won't do it. I mean, that's effectively what you're trying to do, right? If you say 1,000, or I'm sorry, yeah, if it's you're going to give them up to a $10,000 fine, that's what it would have done, or a year in jail. So in other words, going back to my scenario, if somebody goes and they say, I hate black people, and they write it down, they have a little manifesto about how they hate black people, and then they go to Dollar General like this one man did a year ago, and he kills a bunch of black people, well, then what would happen is, on top of the penalty for going and killing people, they would add a $10,000 fine or a year in jail. So let's think of this through. Since people can't seem, it's like, it's beyond me. Well, it's not beyond me because I can think. So here's how that works out. If going to jail for killing somebody is not a deterrent, would a $10,000 fine for having hateful thoughts be any more of a deterrent? I mean, the person already is accepted, I'm going to either go to jail or potentially be shot by the police when I go commit this horrendous act. But somehow, all of a sudden, it's going to be, well, wait a minute. If they catch me, they're also going to fine me $10,000 because I wrote a manifesto. I better not do that. I changed my mind. I'm not going to kill people. Like, that's not how it works. They've already decided they're going to commit a heinous act. So if it's beyond you, it's because you weren't thinking in the first place. All right. And I'm sorry to be mean, but I just feel like people aren't really considering everything here. They just kind of make this assumption. You know what I think it is? I think what happens is a lot of people make the assumption, hey, that would deter me. Like, I wouldn't want to be fined $10,000. And so then they assume that other people would follow suit. But they also forget that they're not willing to kill somebody in the first place. So a $10,000 fine isn't going to stop me, because the fact that I personally just don't want to kill people, that before we even get to the legal part of it, I just don't want to kill people, period. That's what stops me from killing people. I don't want to kill people. I don't want to hurt people. I don't even like yelling at my own son. Okay. I don't like violence. I dislike it. I'm not afraid of it. If I'm confronted with it, I'll deal with it, but I dislike it. So what stops me first and foremost is my own moral bearing. After that, like if for some reason I got very angry and I wanted to punch somebody, I might I might use the law to say, okay, do I really want to do this? I'll get in trouble. I can get arrested for punching somebody for assault and battery. I better not do that. Right. Like if I'm in an emotional state where I'm angry, but after that, it's unlikely that I'm going to go any further and go, okay, well, I'm willing to go to jail for assault and battery, but whew, I'm not willing to pay that $10,000 fine. Like criminals don't put that much thought into this. And so this is why I have such a problem with this. Is why I get so snarky and snippy with people, because I'm like, you really need to think this through. Like if it's going to be a deterrent, what about it is going to deter that isn't being deterred already? Let's see what else we got. We got a couple other comments I saw in here. Shameful. Okay, Northside Coalition. Northside Coalition was there in numbers. There were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. So they were there in numbers. Let's see. Roy Diamond voting no. Who's shocked? Okay. Well, I mean, I guess. I mean, there were 11 other no's. I mean, were you not shocked there? I mean, what I just saw that comment a moment ago. Where'd that comment go? Yeah, there we go. Looks like the typical usual suspects voting yes, which also means the typical usual suspects voting no. Like I said, this is along party lines. And so there to me, there is a sense of party alignment to this idea. So let's see what else. Who else we got in here? Jimmy Midget. I actually like Jimmy. Shame. Many people were trying to get this done. Big respect for Jimmy Peluso, Rockman Johnson, who kept the fight going, and CMS Boylan, Amaro, and others who made the bill better. Sometimes you have to work on a bill like this for a few years before success. Trust me on that. So I think the word is that the bill can come back after about a year. And so that's all the comments that I'm seeing on social media, at least, easy to find ones. I could go dig in a little bit further, but I'm not going to. Okay, so let's get into my speech, because what I want to do is I want to walk through my speech. It was only a short speech, and then I'm going to give you some pro tips so that you can go be at your best. And again, you can use this whether you could have used these tips last night, whether you agreed with the bill or disagreed with the bill. It doesn't matter. Okay, so these are very generic tips, and they will help you out. So let me put my speech up on the screen. So because there were like 65 was the last number that I heard. I think it was 65 people were speaking. They cut time from 3 minutes to a minute and a half. Okay. And so I was prepared before I ever stepped foot into city council, into the city council chambers. I was prepared for actually 2 minutes and 1 minute. So it actually worked out well for me. Okay. So here is my speech. And you're going to notice 2 things here. You're going to notice that there's a long speech, and then there's some stuff that's highlighted. So what I did was I wrote my speech for 2 minutes. Now, the average person speaks at about 150 words per minute. So start with that. That's your first tip. Tip number 1, 150 words per minute is the average speaking time when you're given a speech. Okay. Now it fluctuates. Some people speak faster, some slower, so on and so forth. There may be moments where you speak faster and slower, but start with that. That's a good starting point for you. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to go down to city council and they're going to give me 3 minutes to speak, then you write 450 words. You start with that. Okay. Then the next tip is that you practice it. Okay. You've got to practice reading it out loud, because this will give you a sense for where you line up with that 150 words. And not only the 150 words, but there are times where you'll want to pause on something. Maybe you're trying to make a little bit of a dramatic pause at a particular point. And so, okay, I'm going to pause at this one. And by the time I get, instead of 3 minutes, is 3 minutes and 20 seconds. And I don't want to go 20 seconds over. So then you start cutting out some words. Okay. Or maybe even a whole sentence, depends on, how things are working out for you. So the first thing is 150 words per minute, practice it. Now the practicing is going to be very, very useful to you, because I haven't spoken publicly in quite a while. And so I got there and I noticed I was tired and I wasn't feeling good. So that probably contributed to it, but I was feeling quite nervous. I don't know why. Like, it was just like, I've spoken I've spoken in front of people hundreds of times, right? Like I love public speaking. I think it's fun. I don't have a problem. If you ask me to go up and speak to one person, I will need Xanax. If you ask me to speak and give a speech in front of like 500 people, I'm cool, right? But I got a little nervous because it's been a while, and that's where the practicing helped out because I had practiced and I read it maybe 10, 15 times or something like that. You don't have to, I mean, you can only read it maybe 2 or 3 times, but any amount of practicing is better than zero. So do that. Um, so then what I did was I said, okay, well, I'm going to make this a 2-minute speech. I didn't really need 3 minutes. 2 minutes is fine. And then what I did was I said, all right, what parts, if it gets cut, do I want to read if they cut it down to 1 minute? And that's what you see where the highlighted parts are, the highlighted greenish color, blue, green, blue. And so I could walk in there and I could read the whole thing. If they gave me 3 minutes, right, or 2 minutes. And if they said, nope, you get 1 minute, then I can read just the highlighted parts. So let me read it to you. I'm going to read the whole thing first. D.L. Cummings, Chair of the Libertarian Party of Duval County. My address is on file. There can be no right of speech where any man, however lifted up or however humble, however young or however old, is overawed by force and compelled to suppress his honest sentiments. Frederick Douglass, 1960. I oppose the anti-hate speech bill for practical reasons, along with obvious and major issues with freedom of speech. $10,000 fine? Sounds attractive. But who gets the money? Is it those subjected to the worst sentiments of foul people? No, it's the city. One man harbors ill will towards another, and the city gets paid. Quite the racket. A year in jail? Who pays for that? If you said taxpayers, head to the front of the class. Think about it. Police collect evidence that administrative employees file so attorneys can argue and a judge determines sentencing. Then a jail holds the convicted, paying for shelter, healthcare, food, etc. Taxpayers foot the bill, including victims. I'm of Native American descent and my wife is Asian. If a lowbrow yokel dropped a hateful flyer on my driveway, as we've seen with other communities, I'd be irritated. It's trash I'd have to clean up. But should I, as a taxpayer, be forced to pay for costs associated with jail time because a violation's primary purpose was, quote, expressing or attempting to promote animosity, hostility, or malice? Should my white neighbors, should my black neighbors, my Jewish neighbors, if I find a flyer saying squinty-eyed featherheads are unwelcome, the only thing I might want my taxes going toward is knowing who did it. Then I can encourage others to refrain from hiring them or doing business with them. Okay. So that would have been the whole speech. Now, since I only had 1 minute, well, actually, I take it back. What they did was they said instead of 1 minute, they gave everybody 1 minute and a half. So I had practiced for 1 minute, and I was like, well, that's 30 seconds. Now I don't have to use it up. Keep that in mind when you're going somewhere. Just because they give you 3 minutes, if you can get it out in 1 minute, then that's great. Don't say more than you have to. If you can get it out, if you need the full 3 minutes because there's a bunch of things that you really got to say, okay, write it up like that. That's fine. So I wrote mine to be adaptable for 2 minutes and 1 minute. And then I got there and they said, all right. And I knew it was going to be a hot topic because it's all over social media. The news has reported it multiple times. So I was like, all right, there's probably going to be a bunch of people there. There was a demonstration ahead of the meeting. So I was pretty sure that there were going to be quite a few people there. So I get there and I find out that it's a minute and a half. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm prepared for a minute. I've got an extra 30 seconds. And I look over it and I say, you know what? There is something that I would like to add. And I don't think I have it. I can maybe reach for it. But at any rate, because I did add a little bit. I don't have that here. This is just the digital copy. But I'll kind of give you an idea of what I said. So here is my 1 minute and a half speech. D.L. Cummings, Chair of the Libertarian Party, Duval County. My address is on file. I oppose the anti-hate speech bill for practical reasons, along with obvious and major issues with freedom of speech. $10,000 fine sounds attractive, but who gets that money? Is it those subjected to the worst sentiments of foul people? No, it's the city. One man harbors ill will towards another, and the city gets paid. Quite the racket. A year in jail, who pays for that? If you said taxpayers, head to the front of the class. Think about it. Police collect evidence that administrative employees file so attorneys can argue and a judge determines sentencing. Then a jail holds the convicted, paying for shelter, healthcare, food, etc. Taxpayers foot the bill, including victims. I'm of Native American descent and my wife is Asian. If I find a flyer saying squinty eyed featherheads are unwelcome, the only thing I might want my taxes going toward is knowing who did it. Then I can avoid doing business with them and encourage my friends and family and my community at large to do so as well. The free market can be pretty brutal, and it can be forgiving for those who come to their senses. Unfortunately, government doesn't have such a track record. Now with my speech. Now you might say, well, Dale, wait a minute. That last little bit there wasn't on the page. It wasn't what's on the screen. And you're right. That's what I added. I modified it just a wee bit because I wanted to point out that there is a better way to deal with this. And this is the thing that libertarians can be notoriously bad at. We can say, no, we don't want that legislation, but we don't answer the problem of how do we deal with whatever is causing this demand for legislation. So in this particular case, I wanted to point out a couple of things. I wanted to point out that number one, the $10,000 fine, and I didn't even mention if they get it. I'm just assuming that they do. The $10,000 fine, that's not going to go toward any of the victims. So it's just going to the city. So why should the city get paid if somebody comes and they're hateful toward me? I mean, I'm the one that got, if you will, trespassed against. Furthermore, let's say somebody does, let's say somebody burns a cross on my yard. They don't get shot. Let's say somebody did something crazy like that. And I call the police, they come and get them, and they go to jail for a year. I have to pay for that. That's part of my tax money. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I really want to pay for that. Like, and you might say, well, DL, just that one person, that's not going to cost that. Spread out amongst, everybody. Well, yeah, that one person and the other person and this other person's, for all these different crimes, like all these small expenses add up. Like if you buy a soda every single day on your way to work, that adds up. It's like what, $2.50? That multiply that by 365 or however many days you work, right? $2.50 adds up quickly, right? So now if you say, okay, well, I stop on my way to work and I get a soda, and then I stop on the way home and I get a hot dog. Okay, well, now add that up. And then if you say, well, when I'm traveling, like when I'm going to visit my good friend on the other side of the city, I stop and I do this. Okay, well, add that now. And all these small costs add up. And the same thing applies when it comes to our budgets for city council, for government, right? For any government. Small costs add up. And so for me, I don't want to pay for that, much less many, many other small costs. And this is why the budgets tend to be so big, because we have all these costs. It's nice to go after the big ticket items, but a lot of times we forget about the small ticket items that really add up, and in totality, they can be big ticket items effectively as well. So this was the point that I was trying to make. The other point that I wanted to make, because this is a hot button issue. And so when I was watching people speak, just as far as those who showed up, not only was this kind of along party lines, at least as far as city council is concerned, just looking at the demographics of the crowd, it appeared to be divided by racial lines as well. So I saw more white people going up to oppose it, whereas I saw pretty much, I think every black person that I saw went up and supported, I think. But if it wasn't exactly every one of them, it was most of the black folk, they were supporting it. Most of the white folk that I saw were not in support of it. There were a fair amount of white folk that were supporting it, but I think more so than not, they were opposed to this bill. So because this is a racial issue, I included my own ethnicity. I don't generally like talking about it because I don't think it matters. But I am Native American descent. My wife is very Asian. My son is very Asian looking. And so I wanted to make it very clear that this wasn't just some guy who's got white privilege and just doesn't know what it's like. No, I grew up with racial comments, launched at me as well. Okay. And so I wanted to make this point. And so I said, I said squinty eyed featherheads, to kind of reference my wife and myself. Now, why did I say that? Well, that's That's another tip. Make your speech memorable. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go in there and drop F bombs and yell and get loud, but say something that catches people's attention, right? Or say it in a way. Sometimes you can go and offer a moment of silence. So there was actually, so people went and spoke last night. They didn't all speak on the same topic. So there was a number of people there that were speaking against, I think, some prior resolutions regarding the Gaza war. And one guy went up and he said, "I would like to use my time to have a moment of silence for the people in Gaza." And then instead of speaking any further after that for his minute and a half, room was quiet. That's memorable. I remember it. And I'm sure that several city council members will remember that as well. So look to try to make your speech memorable. That way they hear it and remember it. So what I did was I didn't use really foul language, but I used language that's, a little on the rougher side. Like we're not used to people saying squinty-eyed featherhead anymore these days. Maybe when I was growing up, you might have heard it all the time. But these days it's quite out of the ordinary. And since this is my family and this is, who I am, I felt, I'll say whatever I want, which is kind of how I am anyway. But so when it comes to tips, average speaking time, 150 words per minute. Use that as a starting point so that you can be at your best. Number two, make your speech as memorable as possible. And then I had a third one, and for some reason, I do not have that one. But oh, yeah, adjust your speech. Be prepared to give a shortened speech. So those are my three tips. Okay, I'm gonna go over them one more time because I kind of got a little fumbled there. 150 words per minute. Set up your speech so that you can give it at different times. 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, whatever. Whatever's easy for you. And then put something in there that's memorable. And make sure, and this is kind of like a bonus, I guess, make sure that whatever's in there is what you want people to remember. I wanted people to remember that a $10,000 fine and a year in jail were not really good ideas. And so, so that's what I focused on. And that's when you look at this speech, you'll see that that is the bulk of it right in the center there. So that's how I gave my speech. And how much time did I spend? I probably spent about an hour putting it together, writing it, practicing it, adjusting it a little bit. I didn't put when I depending on the nature of the speech. If I'm going to speak at city council, I don't put a huge amount of effort into my speech, right? Like in this one I did because it was going to be potentially cut short. And so I wanted to make sure I adjusted for that. Um, but I didn't go and, spend hours trying to research what I wanted to say. I just like, okay, what are the main points? All right, let me write about those main points. Let me adjust them. And so I don't have to try to keep reading it out loud over and over and over. I use the 150 words per minute in Microsoft Word or whatever, system that you're using. You can usually see, okay, how many words are here? Oh, I wrote 450 words. Great. I got a roughly 3-minute speech. Now that I have a roughly 3-minute speech, let me start reading it. And then if it's 3 minutes and 30 seconds, then cut it down. Okay. Then once you get it to where it's 3 minutes, right? Or whatever the most amount of time that you have, when you get it to that point, then say, okay, now I want it to be prepared for maybe a 2-minute speech or a 1-minute speech. And so then you go and you highlight the parts that you want and you read those and you see how long it takes you to do those. You say, oh, wow, I'm at 1 minute and 20 seconds. So then since you've got them highlighted, now you cut out words from the highlighted part. That benefits the 3-minute because, or whatever it was. In my case, it was 2 minutes, but it benefited my 2 minutes because now my full 2 minutes is a little bit shorter. And as I'm adjusting my 1 minute. And then make sure you just have something memorable in there so that people don't forget who you are. All right. They remember, oh yeah, that's the guy that said that somewhat almost kind of sort of, but not really racist thing, and that's what I did. So that's my speech. Once the video comes out, I will post it on social media. So if you're following me on Facebook or on Twitter, you'll be able to see the actual speech and how I gave it and whether or not I sounded any good. And it's unfortunate that I don't have it now because I was quite nervous. Like I reported that my stomach was doing calisthenics. I was pretty nervous, but I also think I was just not feeling so well and kind of tired. So that added to the stress. But overall, I'm pleased with the speech that I gave. And I hope that this has helped you out. So let me take a look at any last comments that we got here. Let's see here. Do 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 do. Let's see. Is Matt C really a Republican? Though seems like he votes with the Duval Dems more often than not. I mean, honestly, I don't follow that closely. I'm just like, look, I personally pay attention vote by vote by vote. And then eventually, if you stick out in my mind, then I start saying, hey, wait a minute, so, maybe some of you folks out there are a little bit more attentive to city council than I am, and good for you. I probably should be, but, there's a lot going on here. So anyway, that's my show. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, join me tomorrow. Rory Diamond will join me from District 13 to discuss legislation that he's proposing to push back on Donna Deegan's budget, raising a bit of stir. It's been in the news. So going to bring him on. We're going to talk about it. It won't be hostile, but it won't necessarily be friendly either. Try to keep it kind of neutral, so if I hear something that I don't like, then I'll push back on it. But otherwise, mostly trying to get a sense of what he's up to and why he feels like this is the particular direction that he needs to go. And once again, remember, I will be aiming for 7:30, but kind of keep a watch out for 7 to 7:30, just in case for the next week or so as we get settled here. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. ish, somewhere around there, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.